Don't we all have those daydreams where you imagine what you'd do if you won the lottery? If you're like me, you'd have probably said to a friend at some point, oh, I'm definitely going to get an Harry or a Red, something that's camera related and it's really expensive. Those aspirations are definitely where we should be heading. Unfortunately, it isn't as simple as that, and we're pretty unlikely to win the lottery. So what I've done for you guys is put together in this video a list of 5 pieces of filmmaking equipment that I personally use on a day-to-day basis and have 100% helped me develop as a filmmaker over the years. And all 5 pieces of equipment are considered as budget friendly. So if you want to watch this video and see how many of the 5 you already have for your own version of equipment bingo, or you are new to filmmaking and you just want to know what are the best pieces of filmmaking equipment to buy as a beginner, this video is for you. Welcome back to the channel, everyone, and Happy New Year to you all. So if you're watching this video just after its release or in a year's time, Christmas might have just passed, you're feeling a little bit generous and you want to treat yourself to a little bit of filmmaking equipment for the year ahead. Yep, this video is all about items of filmmaking equipment that I feel are crucial for you to have in your equipment list as a filmmaker or a videographer. What I've tried to do in this video are recommend pieces of equipment that are considering the typical position of an aspiring or a beginner freelancer may have, both from an experience perspective and the typical perspective of investment as someone who's just starting out in this industry. Also, I can't tell if you can see it much, but come on, I've added a bit of that into the background. I bought it a few months ago and I've never used it. See how that looks. We all know that filmmaking as an industry can be very expensive, and that is why places such as rental houses can be such a valuable asset to have at your disposal. However, there are definitely pieces of equipment that you personally should own as a way to develop you as a filmmaker and potentially even fast track your ability as a videographer in general. I also appreciate that the term budget is always subjective. Some of you guys might have a set budget of £50, whilst others may have a higher limit of what they consider to be a budget-friendly option. Therefore, I've purposely chosen to go through the 5 items of filmmaking equipment that I feel are must-haves in price ascending order. So you can essentially decide to stop watching the video whenever you feel you've hit your limit. So coming in at number 1 at £3,000 is the first must-have item is a reflector. If you studied a media related course at college or university, chances are you'd have already come face to face with something like this. A reflector is a very versatile lighting accessory, which if you buy a multi-reflector or a multi-use reflector like this one, can it fit in? Can help you in a range of scenarios, and in some cases might eliminate the need for a light. So if you're on a tight budget and you don't have a light, and for instance you're shooting outside, then a reflector can be a really handy thing to have on set with you and in your bag at all times. The purpose of a traditional reflector is to reflect a light source and redirect it into your desired location. With this particular reflector, and I will leave a link in the description below along with all the items that we're going to go through in this video, you can choose the material that it reflects off. So you have your standard foil looking reflection. You can then reverse the cover for a gold material, or you can have a pure white reflection, and they all have different outcomes. That is with your standard reflection. This is with the white material. It doesn't do that much, but it does add a little bit of reflection. And if we turn it around to gold, you can see there that it's a much warmer. I'm not personally a fan of this look, but it will definitely work in some scenarios, perhaps when you're doing a short film and you want that really warm touch to people's skin tones. And then finally inside, you have a piece of diffusion in there as well. Reflectors can vary in price completely depending on the manufacturer that you go with. This one that I purchased from Newer on Amazon, I got for about 25 quid about 4 years ago, and it served me really well. Next up, and as we increase in price a little bit, we move to the Canon 50mm f1.8 EF lens. If you're an aspiring filmmaker, the chances are that your order of investment will always have camera related equipment first, and then after that comes along lighting and audio. That lack of lighting might potentially result in you being in low light situations, and the zoom lenses that you have might not necessarily excel in those environments. So what are the solutions to this? Firstly, you could have a camera that has impressive ISO performance, but again, if you're new to filmmaking, you might not have the budget for a camera with that capability. So this, the Canon 50mm 1.8 lens, has without doubt been, let me focus, catch up. There we go. This lens has without doubt been one of the most useful lenses that I ever purchased back in the day when I started out as a videographer. I remember buying this in a Wetherspoons as a student at university, and I spent 50 or 60 quid secondhand, I think I got this for. And I remember that being the biggest investment I made at that time. And I was like, where I might now be able to afford more expensive lenses and camera equipment, I'll always look back at this lens and remember this as being one of the most sensible investments that I made back in the day, purely because of the return on investment that I've had and the usage that this lens has had over the years. I actually used this lens in my first 2 years of doing wedding videography, until I then upgraded to my Lumix S1 and the 85mm 1.8 lens that I've got for that. Us British wedding videographers don't have the luxury of bright blue skies for long hours of the day, so even in the summer, some indoor shots needed a lens with this type of aperture in order to get the shot. Optically, it's not going to be the sharpest lens out there, and for the £100 mark, or like me, 60 quid second hand, it shouldn't ever be expected to be as sharp with the more premium offering of lenses that are available nowadays. But purely as a low light solution and an opportunity to get really shallow depth of field in either your photography or your filmmaking, it's such a great lens to have. Oh, are we running low on the old haze? I mentioned a little earlier that lighting is typically an investment choice that comes after you're happy with your camera equipment. That was the case with me, as I didn't actually own my first light until August 2020. That was 3.5 years into me being a videographer. Just like camera equipment, lighting isn't always necessarily cheap. However, there are a few really good lighting systems that are helpful for those who are on a budget. When factoring in the range of lighting scenarios that an aspiring filmmaker may potentially be in, the Aputure MC is a great option to have. It works really nicely as an on-camera LED light, but also for product work, which you might have seen in some of my previous videos on the channel. I used to use it in some of my earlier videos, and to be fair, if I turn it on now, that's the amount of fill that the light adds, and that's a meter away from me, out of camera, so it can work really nicely as a fill light as well. And with its HSI and effect modes, which all have decent power output, you can also get pretty creative with it as well. Regardless of your development over the next few years, I'm pretty confident that having a light such as the Aputure MC will still come in handy later down the line, making it a great investment from the start. Almost forgot the price of this Aputure. I've just looked on CVP. It's on sale for 80 quid. Typically it's around the £100 mark, but be sure to shop around for the best deal. At number 4, this is where we start to enter the 3-digit area of filmmaking. And if this starts to feel a little bit out of your current price range, I'd still recommend watching this video, because this is where the true concept of investment, where something is purchased in advance, hoping for a return on investment and a reward later down the line, comes into effect and has been considered for these final few items. Moving from a budget tripod to a fluid head tripod will most likely be the least exciting investment in your ever-growing equipment list. However, when you do take a step back and see the difference that a fluid head tripod has on the shots that you're making, it does make it worth it, I promise. They play a big part in helping you create smooth camera movements such as pans and tilts. First of all, you'll really appreciate having those smooth shots, but also so will the editor, because they won't need to use warp stabilizer because of how buttery smooth your pans and tilts are going to be. A decent fluid head tripod can eliminate the slight wobbles that your hands can unknowingly give off, which has the ability to be picked up in the camera if either your camera or your lens doesn't have any form of stabilization. I'm sure I'm not the only one who can remember using an elastic band on the tripod head when I was younger to try and get that smoothness, because my hands were just too woo. Well, with the Manfrotto Pro 502 fluid head, you can throw those elastic bands away. The fluid head has adjustable tension in both its tilt and its drag, which means that it's flexible to fit your particular style of shooting and the amount of support that you require. This fluid head also has a 3/8 inch screw underneath the standard, so it can be attached to most grip equipment such as tripods and sliders. Just going back to the idea of investing early for particular bits of equipment, I personally truly feel that getting a fluid head early on in your career has its advantages, rather than going for a cheap alternative now and then being limited to the payload of that tripod head, depending on whether you get an even bigger camera or the rig that supports that camera later down the line. And with a payload of up to 7 kilos for this Pro fluid head, I know that this particular head's going to be used for many more years to come. And at last but not least, this light is the Amaran 200D. But this light isn't the light that I'm recommending to you guys. What I'm recommending as an aspiring filmmaker and a budget-friendly option, even more budget-friendly than this one, is the Amaran 100D. I don't own that light, but I have a friend who does, so I've asked him if I can film some cutaways of that light. So hopefully, right now, you'll see some nice, beautiful shots of that light, not this one. Sorry if that gets confusing. The Amaran 100D by Aputure is a great light with impressive power output for the price, considering its capability. COB lights like this have a Bowens mount, which means they're highly versatile and can add a range of modifiers onto the front of the light. You could attach a softbox to the front of it for a really nice soft light source, which is perfect for interviews and talking to camera like this. Ooh. You can add barn doors onto the front of it like this one from Aputure, which allows you to shape the light and refine it a little bit more for those harder edges. And it also has a gel holder and a honeycomb grid inside there as well. And with Aputure alone, there are a range of other attachments such as the Fresnel mount, the spotlight mount, the lantern and more. And for filmmakers who are on a budget, versatility is key in making the most out of that initial spend. If you watch a lot of YouTube, and especially filmmakers and influencers like Peter McKinnon, Matty Harpoyer, Gerald Undone, etc., chances are you will have heard of the brand Aputure. Not to be confused with the term aperture that we were talking about a little earlier. The development of lighting in the last 10 years or so has seen a switch from your traditional Fresnels or HMI lights over towards LED lighting, especially COB lights, with even the big dogs at Arri now releasing their own COB lighting system called the Orbiter. Aputure is a fantastic brand that have helped develop filmmakers, including myself, over the years with their lighting and the creative opportunities that come with those lights. Their Light Storm series, including the 120D, the 300D and the 600D, can be considered as quite expensive for some filmmakers out there who want to own their own lights. Other manufacturers out there such as Godox saw that opportunity to attract audiences with smaller budgets than those who can afford the Lightstorm series. So in retaliation to this, Aputure then expanded their Amaran range and introduced their COB light systems, which is much more budget friendly while still offering similar creative opportunities. There are some sacrifices such as build quality and user experience compared to the Lightstorm series. However, once again, considering the level of supporting equipment that an aspiring filmmaker might have at that time, I find the things that are missing in the Amaran range compared to those Lightstorm lights is completely fine. I feel like I'm... For example, the lights in the Amaran range don't come with a V-mount plate as standard for when mains power isn't an option. But the amount of juice that these V-Lock batteries would need to power lights such as these aren't cheap. So if mains power is still achievable in the location that you're shooting in, then this isn't going to be an issue. There are a few other lights in the Amaran range already, and it's only been announced for, I want to say, a year or so. And within that range, you have the 60D, the 60X, the 100D, the 100X, the 200D, and the 200X. But I feel that the 100D falls nicely in that budget-friendly range that still has enough power to surpass the expectations that's needed for a new filmmaker, potentially such as yourself, for a very well justified price of around 200 quid. And there we have it. Those are the 5 pieces of filmmaking equipment that I feel and recommend that you should buy if you're starting out as a filmmaker, or even if you're a few years into being a filmmaker. If you've not got these in your equipment list, I'd highly recommend getting them. I'm feeling generous, so I'm gonna go through a few more bits of equipment really quickly in a generation game style way for items and accessories that are all under £50 that will also be really nice and handy to have. First of all, a Magic Arm. These are great for mounting additional equipment, which might start off being for an external monitor, but then as you progress, you might want to add a wireless receiver onto your camera rig for things such as a Terra deck. These are the classic case of the more you pay, the better you get, buy cheap, buy twice and all of that stuff, but I reckon you could get a pretty decent one for around the £50 mark. Multi-tool. Hands down, a multi-tool will be something either yourself or someone else on set will need at some point on that shoot. To have a range of screwdriver heads, hex keys, and that all-important base plate tightener at your disposal in a little multi-tool set, people are gonna love you. And finally, for one that is literally less than a £5, I got these a few months ago and they cost me £4 in total. Let me get them 1 second. Literally, these 2 things are lifesavers and help me when I get back into the office. I put the cards, depending on whether they have just been used or if they're good to go, I have them on my desk so I know which cards I can use, pick out and start shooting straight away. These cost me £2 each and they just assure me that I'm not going to overwrite some footage that I've not yet backed up or anything like that. And having them in colour boxes, I couldn't get red, but orange will do. But I know green's good to go and orange is a warning. I do hope you've enjoyed the video and I hope I've not just shown 5 bits of equipment that I've got and made a cheap video out of it. I really think that the 5 items that I've gone through in this video will serve a purpose, have their advantages, and will help you develop as a filmmaker. Please give the video a like if you like the video. Drop a comment below if there's any other bits of equipment that you personally think are essential must-haves for any filmmaker out there, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And as always guys, I will see you in the next video.